Welcome back to another episode of the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come together to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God, killing characters, and lowering the egos of all other people at the table. I'm your host, DM Mitch, and today we've got a special guest. DM Neal and myself are joined by none other than B. Dave Walters. And we're going to be taking some time and talking about the cleric class, both from the position of being a DM who has players at the table that are playing clerics, but also as a DM who may be role-playing clerics as NPCs. It's a fantastic discussion. I can't wait for you to get into it. Before we dive in, though, we have a Apple Podcast 5-star review. This review comes from JK_313 and is entitled Delightful, 5 stars. Delightful 5e D&D podcast, would recommend. The obvious troll is being obvious in their 1-star review below, so you can safely ignore their weird tantrum. 5 stars, 2 thumbs up. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Fantastic. Thank you so much, JK313. Really appreciate your review, your support of the show, and we're not going to give airtime to that 1-star review, but we will say that when we did receive that 1-star review, we at the show decided that it was a badge of honor for ourselves that we got that 1-star review. But anyway, thank you for your 5-star review, for supporting the show. We appreciate it. Without any further ado, let's get into this episode. Let's get into the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meat?
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
So today on the meat, we have a very special guest. I'm super excited. We have B. Dave Walters, who is Victor on LA by Night, Freely on Silver and Steel, writer and co-creator of D&D's A Darkened Wish. You got to add that D&D's because it's official, like a referee with a whistle.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Done.
100%.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming
Yeah,
on.
we're pumped to have you.
Like I said, I'm very excited.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
For anybody out there who isn't familiar with you or maybe just wants to know a little bit more about you, can you answer that age-old question and just tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
First of all, I object to the fact that this isn't video. I wore pants for nothing. Do you know how hard it was to get this Strahd von Zarek culturally appropriate tux, like steam cleaned in time? Like this, I'm wearing an ascot, sir, an ascot for nothing. B. Dave Walters, I say words about things. I'm literally somewhere 7 days a week doing something, and there's so many things that even I can't keep track of all of it. I am a streamer and a content creator. I'm a writer. I've written movies. I've written TV. Right now, I'm crowdfunding for a documentary called Dear America from a Black Guy, which is pinned at the top of my Twitter at B. Dave Walters. But I think I'm first and foremost a storyteller and lifelong geek.
Fantastic.
There are so many things, so many things that I can see on your Twitter that I love, but we'll even focus in a little bit more. So is there anything that you're currently working on, and we have to put the caveat, that you can talk about, that you want to share with our listeners?
You know, this is spoiler alert, listeners. I'm speaking to you from the recent past. I am going to be doing a show for Dimension 20 side quest where we're returning to Leviathan with Mercer and Marisha and Christina Ariel and Abria Iyengar and Carlos Lunes, and DM'd by Brennan Lee Mulligan and me playing a terrible bugbear killer. So that is a lot of fun. That's you guys are really going to enjoy that one. That one, honestly, pending when you're seeing this, is probably going live about the time you're seeing this. If not, it's going to be going live soon. So that's dope. A couple of other things that are in the pipeline, but haven't necessarily happened yet. I think by the time this goes up, then we probably will have finished season 2 of Dungeons and Dragons: A Darkened Wish. But of course, you could catch up to it on YouTube if you haven't seen it. The streaming show, which is a direct in continuity tie-in to the comic series. And yeah, I'm like NDA. Yeah, stuff. Follow me on Twitter.
Yep.
Stuff has happened, and hey,
That's
it
what-
was fantastic, wasn't it? Yeah, there. Now you know.
Oh my gosh, you won't believe it.
Yeah, right now, and I'm storytelling a Outbreak Undead game that is a limited run, a Werewolf the Apocalypse game that is a limited run, Dungeons and Dragons: A Dark Wish, which is a full season, but we're through 6 or 7 episodes, so we're in the home stretch there. I think that's everything, and then I run about 6 to 10 Patreon games and more. Oh, and then there's Silver and Steel, like you said, freely on Tuesdays, and then Ascension, which is Thursday mornings, but I play in those. So yeah,
It's a task, it seems, to even remember all of the
Dude,
things you have going on, huh?
I make zero expectations that people keep track of where I am and what I'm doing, because I find it difficult to keep track of where I am and what I'm doing. And I came right off of one game to do this, and then right after this, I have some phone calls, and then I'm going into another game tonight. And this is supposed to be my day off. So hey, that is my life.
I feel like the best analogy is that you are that restaurant that everyone goes to, but then you talk about it and you're like, what do you mean he writes A Darkened Wish? I've never even heard of this. And you're like, I've only seen him on LA by Night and I love it. And you're just like, well, then you've got to read A Darkened Wish.
You know, it is an apt parallel if the restaurant was like the frickin' mall food court. I'm like, can I interest you in overpriced pizza? Perhaps you would like some more chicken over here. There's also
I've got these wicked Philly cheesesteaks.
I feel like
I'm like rocking the hot dog on a stick hat, like is the whole time. Yeah,
I feel like this weird hypothetical situation that we're painting is the perfect segue into the last part of this interview section, which is asking you a surprise question, one that comes from one of our Patreon dragons. This one comes from Mindweave RPG, and the question that Mindweave RPG would like to ask. So this is like we're diving really right into role play territory here.
Let's do it.
So you are a retired adventurer, whatever fantasy world, whatever sci-fi world, whatever you want to choose for this role play experience. You are a retired adventurer with children. Your eldest wants to take up the life of an adventurer. Do you discourage or do you encourage them to get into that lifestyle?
Oh, encourage. No, life is all about the pursuit of glory, and I would not take from them the things that shape me. And quite frankly, I have kids, and I have kind of lived this where it's like my job is to make it easier for you than it was for me. So whatever you want to do, I would enable it. I would hope my children would follow me into the mystical arts. You know, not just a pure fighter or a rogue that would always know that they're, but
see my library of books, learn from these. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, like the question even implies, you are retired, so you've made it through your adventures intact.
Mm-hmm.
So hey, go forth, children, right?
No, that's the riskiest decision you can make, though. Being a parent of an adventurer, whoo, that's rife for DM strife right there.
I mean, I appreciate the idea that I don't know, man. It's not to be too meta, but it's like you got to enable your kids to be your own people, their own people. You just kind of have to just hope that you can point them in the right direction and be like, hey, maybe skip the Mines of Moria. Maybe don't go that way. Maybe, one of my favorite quotes, and I just looked this up yesterday because it was in an article I was writing for a book submission, because of course it was. One of my favorite quotes is, I judge you unfortunate because you have never lived through misfortune. You've passed through life without an opponent. No one can ever know what you are capable of, not even you. That is by Seneca, the Stoic philosopher. And I love that so much. So I'd be like, yeah, no, get out there. No, you're not going to be a scribe. You go do a tour in the world, and then come back and we'll raise a cup together.
I love that you also added in and I hope that they become a scholar of the magical arts like me.
Yeah. Also, hope. Do not force.
Yes, of course, of course. So thanks for that answer, and thank you to Mindweave RPG for that fantastic question.
Thank you, Mindweave.
So we're going to jump into it. And as I was setting this up, I realized that despite having an entire run of episodes devoted to classes, we never decided to make a name for it. So I came up with the idea of calling all clerics. So you all voted, and we are going to be talking about clerics today. So one of the first things we like to do when talking about classes is just the history of clerics, our own or what we can pull from Dungeons and Dragons.
I will say what the common misconception about clerics is that they're nothing but heal bots. Clerics are one of the strongest classes in the game, and they always have been. I think the most time I played a cleric was actually in Pathfinder. I played a cleric that went into the multi-class with Inquisitor into Grim Harvester, I think it was called Gray Warden, something like that. But the whole point is they kind of were almost like fanatical in their pursuit of justice. That they were Rorschach. They were like, there is good and there is evil, and that is it. And that's what that character was. She was just a wrecking ball, and I loved it a lot. Especially back in like 3.5 days, where you had level 9 casting, which of course was game breaking in its own right, and then you fought as well as a fighter. So you fought as well as a fighter and cast nearly as well as a wizard. Gods help you literally if you were fighting the undead. It was fantastic. So I think realize they're much, 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 much more than Band-Aid dispensaries. And if you're healing in combat, you're probably walking up your action economy anyway, unless one of your companions is down.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they get a bad rep, I would say, that there's too many groups out there that there's almost this like character creation night comes and people look around and they go, oh, like nobody picked a cleric again. And there's like this group dissatisfaction of that because they go, oh, but we need a healer. But there's that mentality of nobody wants to be that healer. But like you said, a cleric is so much more than that. That is just a feature of a cleric. And especially now with where role-playing games have gone, that's really is only a small part of the class. There's so much more in 5th edition and with what a cleric can be.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about pure healing power. The strongest healer is a life cleric 1, lore bard 19, in terms of just putting out health. But yeah, especially if you're not familiar and you haven't played the class. I guess I played Hatch the Turtle life cleric in the other show that I did for D&D Beyond, the role in the family that we played with the kids. Side note, I'm lucky enough that I've got to do enough things that I'm starting to lose track of things that I've done, which is weird.
That's awesome.
But well, I'm just fortunate, man. I've rolled some timely crits in life. Yeah, especially as you look at the different domains and the different channeling abilities and the things that the different gods bring to the table. I am always like I like multi-classing. I always have. It's kind of hard to get me to spend 20 levels in one class for just in any system. And even like mixing in like a little bit like cleric paladin mixed for like especially if you have like a worship a war god, and then mix in a little bit of paladin in there. Like it can be very exciting. Very exciting.
I also liked your description because all I could think was that scene from Step Brothers. Did we just become best friends?
Yep.
Because most tables don't have that dissatisfaction if I'm there, because that's my go-to. I will just take it. And then part of it is just, I guess part of it is subverting that expectation that it's only a heal bot, because one, I'm going to wear more armor and have a bigger shield and just go stand in the middle of it anyways. But then Mitch, I was thinking of like examples of play, but when we fought the Tarask, and then I pulled the deck of many things and made an undead Tarask, and we fought it again, I played a war cleric both times and was, like you were saying, the amount of damage that I could put out as a war cleric, and I think maybe I dipped fighter a little bit, but it was utter insanity. And it's so good and so versatile.
Mm-hmm. Very versatile. It is. I think it's probably second only to Bard in terms of like the chassis that you can take and then make anything out of it. You know.
Well, and speaking of that versatility as well, once I don't know. There are certain classes where, I mean, really, you can pick any class and create a unique character. But with the cleric, it almost like paves the way for every cleric to be so different, because step one, okay, I want to play a cleric. All right, my class is chosen. But I would say almost more important is then you go, okay, but who is my cleric going to follow? Who is he going to worship, or she going to worship? And that just opens up a whole new amount of doors of like, what kind of person am I playing, and what do they believe when you go and look at all the different types of gods? And honestly, within that, like, who's to say you don't play a character who is a pagan, worships a number of gods as well, opening up those doors even further to what kind of person is it that I am going to be role-playing.
Yeah, and I would say that's the most important thing about character creation anyway, is to come up with who they are even before the class.
Yeah.
Because that character is ultimately what you're going to remember, and that character might be served by a dozen different mechanical builds under the hood. And I would say also mechanically, a big advantage that clerics have is they get their domain at level 1, when other classes have to wait till 2, oftentimes even 3, to figure out what their specialty is going to be. Right out of the gates. So you could have an all cleric game, and not just personality wise be different, mechanically be different, literally from like the jump, which is nice.
And some of the things that, in doing research, I mean, first off, the description that it's a fighter plus magic user is kind of how the original approach was in original D&D. But also, I was looking through some things and how you got spells or where those spells were coming from was a really interesting approach. I think it was second edition, where basically like first and second level, that's you did that work. You as the cleric have that ability within you to cast these. But then third and fourth, oh, well, you're getting it from like a solar. And then once you get into these higher levels, then maybe you are actually tapping directly into whatever deity or pantheon that you're serving. And I was like, first off, that I need to immediately implement this the next time I have a cleric at my table, because that's awesome. So yeah, just the ways that you can approach it. Because the other thing I thought is, it depends on your world. There's no reason why you don't operate, and at your homebrew table it's a monotheistic culture where it's just one, and again, you're just taking those particular aspects as a cleric. You are a cleric of war, but it is still just that one deity that is all encompassing.
Yeah. No, there's 100 ways to approach it that are all going to be interesting. It's funny, there's a couple of times I've encountered where people played characters that were atheists in games that clearly there were gods, like clearly. Like, it's like I'm literally raising the dead over here by the power of my deity, and they're like, you're not though. And you're like, what? Like, oh, okay, great. I don't know what more it will take to convince you, but okay, you know.
Yeah, but those approaches are so good because that inter-party conflict, because it may, I mean, I've watched way too much Young Justice. I do another podcast about it, so this is why my brain will go there. But the idea that magic exists in that world, it is real. Like, magic is real, and you have one character who refuses to believe it and presents a scientific explanation for everything that happens that is clearly magic related.
I haven't seen season 3. The first 2 were so good, though.
Yes. 3 is also good, and 4 is on its way.
Just that Calderon, that welcome back. I was like, yes. Okay, sorry, no spoilers, kids. Watch Young Justice if you haven't yet.
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, that conflict, and even the conflict of having, the other thing I thought of was 2 clerics that are either the same, let's say 2 war clerics again, because I really like war clerics, obviously, but they could both even follow the same deity and have wildly different views on what that means.
Oh yeah, just like people can follow the same deity and have wildly different ideas of what that means. You know,
Yes.
I say as I motion broadly at everything, you know? Yeah, no, 100%. I just think I would say if you haven't done it, try it, and do recognize that doesn't mean that you will be useless, and it doesn't make you just the medic. You may be the medic. Medics are important, but you don't have to be just the medic. And hopefully your DM will toss you some undead, and you really get to, like, you know, get sideways with them.
Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit more about that last part. In like, obviously, a lot of our listeners, they may be thinking about like next time they get to play a cleric, but also a lot of our listeners are dungeon masters who get to play their games with a cleric in their amongst their players, or just getting to roleplay NPCs that are clerics. And so, how do you introduce either clerics who are PCs to your adventures, like maybe at the start of an adventure, helping those PCs become part of this journey and this story with the rest of the characters? And also, along with that, we can kind of explore how do you introduce clerics as NPCs into your stories and your adventures.
I think a lot of us know that one of the core conceits of this game is the adventuring party doesn't really make sense. Like, the six of us met at a tavern, so let's go on a 2-month-long camping trip in hell. You know,
Unless
quite
you're
literally or
starting with
figuratively.
like, you're sitting down and together. You're starting with some like, we are all part of a guild with the same exact mentality. Like, it's sometimes it feels like you're trying to push everything into something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, everybody gets a unique, inciting incident, but the reality is not always. With the cleric characters, though, I do tend, or any powerful divine character, I lean more on like the dreams and the signs and the portents and stuff, because theoretically, their god does care. And I think it's completely valid if you've got a cleric of Tyr that's about to show up, if the night before everyone has a prophetic dream, because Tyr can do that, and then they meet this person, same things as the NPCs. One of the things that I've really liked playing around with, especially in recent times with, again, emotions broadly at everything in the world, is I've had lawful good villains, because the things they were doing were 100% in keeping with both law and good, but from their point of view were still terrible. I've also had characters that were evil but weren't wrong, and then confronting the characters with those moral quandaries, which I'll say as an aside, my niche is high level storytelling. Level 20 is my jam. And I run big groups of them. I mean, this weekend I'm running an all Paladins game of level 5 characters with Mark Mir, Bria Iyengar, Jen Kretschner, and someone whose name I'm forgetting, but we'll look up and know shortly. But hey, by the time you hear this, you can go watch the VOD. I guarantee you it was astonishing. And I called it the God Squad. There you go. Oh yeah, Devin from Dustin from D4. That's the 4th person. So it's gonna be like 4 level 20 paladins. And one of the ways that you challenge large groups is not about power, although there's always a bigger beast. It becomes less about what can you do and more about what should you do, and more moral quandaries and the consequences of their actions. And when we first did Theogony at Kairos way back when, which is a level 20 game, I told them, I'm like, some of you have the power that you could summon a tidal wave and wipe out a kingdom. Like, you could kill thousands with a spell, but after that there's gonna be a refugee crisis. What are you gonna do about that? Their allied nations are going to send whole armies against you. And yeah, you probably can destroy that army too. But if you got 10,000 archers all shoot at you, statistically speaking, 2,000 of them are going to get 20s, and you're going to be dead. So just understand, action and reaction should exist in the world. But yeah, that's what, when it comes to introducing those characters, I think just as long as they have a meaningful reason to be there, then it's easy. It's no harder than introducing anything else, at least, for my mind.
Well, I think you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head when the cleric is the reasoning in lots of situations for that group to get together and begin the journey. Cleric, paladin, warlock, these are classes that most players are, just by choosing to play them, telling you as the dungeon master, I want to have some sort of interactions with the world beyond mine. And that can come into play with, like you said, the adventure can start from the cleric in the group having a dream sequence or a vision from the god that the cleric worships. Or, I mean, you could, if you want to, you can literally have the voice of that god speak to the cleric themselves. There's so many ways the cleric can, you can, as the DM, you can describe signs of nature, like your person, you see the wind blowing in this direction, or the streams all flowing in this direction, the stars, the planets all seem to align. And that's interesting, because in the end, after the game, you can always even have a conversation with your players and go, so do you think that was your god actually pointing you towards this adventure, or was your cleric just looking for signs to bring him into this adventure? But yeah, the cleric is a great class to be that PC that is literally the catalyst to bringing you into whatever adventure you're looking to get into.
And I will tell you a curveball that Chris Lindsay has done with great effect, and I myself have done on occasion, is when you have a situation where like all is lost, like death is imminent. You know, the mind flayer has wrapped its tentacles around your head and is about to eat your brain. That's when you have your moment of divine intervention, where maybe the clerics, maybe the god, and you weren't even a cleric, a god shows up and is like, hey, so check this out. Seems like you're in a bit of a pinch, literally. Serve me and I'll get you out of this. Or maybe it's a warlock patron that is like, hey, I actually don't care what happens to you. I'm the great old one. But, you know, if you want to negotiate, maybe you're mine now. And it puts or, you know, die. And then the players got some options, and then they have to wrestle with what does that mean about their character if they go down this whole other path. I mean, we've been blessed with these fantasy worlds where the gods are manifest and involved, and you might play them alternatively aloof, but at least they exist enough where you can have them take an active role should you choose to, not in like a cheap Deus Ex Machina way, because for the most part, and this is just a general rule of storytelling, coincidences that get you into trouble are good, coincidences that get you out of trouble are garbage. But there's times that having literally the hand of God show up can be even more fulfilling, especially if it helps them snatch victory from the jaws of defeat.
Man, I just had this amazing, as you were talking, that like scene just got painted in my mind of you have a cleric PC and they're about to die by whatever that doom is, the mind flayer, and literally the mind flayer's mouth is gaping open, the tentacles are wrapped around, and everything freezes, and they're looking around, and literally everything in the area has completely frozen, as if time has stopped, and yet there is this glowing being walking around, hands behind their back, of course, and just talking calmly, like you said, giving that option. But I love that idea, even in the sense of, you mentioned like level 20 campaigns, like high level. If you're getting to that point, especially like a level 20, a high level cleric is going to start to, even beyond the god that they worship, may start to catch the eye of other gods, maybe even enemy gods. And so in my mind, I thought maybe this is an enemy god who's saying, come worship me. Your god is not saving you here. Will you turn? And that's a crazy role-playing opportunity to give to your player. And they might choose death. But then they've chosen death in that situation, and it's been their choice.
And it's going to feel more glorious for them. Also, you get bonus points for this if you physically remove the player, like step out of the room with them, you know? And then
absolutely. That's always, then you got the rest of the players going, what is happening?
Yep.
Well, hey, thank you for this. I am also, I guess, fortunate enough to forget games that I've played, but one just came flying back to me, and it's the least humble brag I have. When I was playing D&D in a castle with Satine as my dungeon master, that's basically the conversation that we had, that something needed to be sacrificed, and we stepped out, and I gave up all of my cleric power to basically take the next step in a very high level Eberron campaign, and then just went forward as kind of a fighter. And so that's, those conversations totally should happen outside. And there's a lot of in the world, I will now sweep broadly at everything that is happening. In the world that we now live in, that's actually a lot easier because you're not at a table. You're at a virtual table. And like right now, technically, I could do a breakout room on Zoom. We could go have that conversation. We could come back. If you're using Discord, which is what I've been doing, you can just have private messages. You can do private group messages. So technology is there for you to definitely facilitate some very interesting things with a lot more games being online.
It has definitely made it more better. Yep. And I had on my Patreon, I run an ongoing level 20 campaign, and Tiamat has been a recurring character. Where originally I had her show up as she was going to be an enemy because they're all level 20, and she showed up as the Dark Lady originally, and they were all just really nice to her. And then she revealed that she's Tiamat, like, aha, and they still were really nice to her. and I had her like read their minds, and like they were legitimate, like, no, we kind of feel bad for you. Everybody hates you and you've been nothing but cool to us. And so she kind of evolved first into a Dread Pirate Roberts kind of character. Like, I'm gonna hang around because I'll just kill you tomorrow. It's fine. And then she ended up being more like the master, like this like more mischievous counterforce. In her whole thing all the time is like, I keep having her make just the most painfully astute observations about people being hypocrites. And like, where's Bahamut? He's stupid. I'm right here. Do you see him? Nowhere. Look at that. Starving people. They worship him. Do any of my worshipers starve? No. Like every time. And they keep wanting to be like, no, you're Tiamat. We're not listening to you, except you're right. Like, again. Oh
my gosh. And what like an amazing, like, again, one of my favorite things to do is like after a campaign, like have like in-depth conversations with my players about what has occurred during the campaign. And that's just throwing, like, you can just go along with whatever fantasy setting and just go, this is how it is and this is how it's going to be. Or you can go, yeah, this is how it is because this is how it's perceived. But what if we flip this on its head, and for your players to be in a place where they're seeing that, and their PCs are seeing that and getting given these choices to be like, I suppose I can choose the route of this is how everybody has always gone in the history of this world, but this doesn't seem to add up what I'm experiencing. And so do I choose a whole different path like your players are being given in that campaign? That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's one of those, I've been very neck deep in this whole like recent, criticism of the portrayal of race and things in D&D. And I was quite public about the fact that any correlation between race and morality is problematic. And the thing you always got to remember, if you have an intelligent creature, it's got free will. And because it's got free will, it can do what makes sense at the time. If your storytelling is falling back on, it does what it does because it's evil, that's lazy storytelling. Or it does what it does because it's good. That's lazy storytelling. Because you also have to remember the villains are the heroes of their story. To them, they are doing the right thing. So you have to see it through the lens of what would an intelligent creature do here? And that is how you breathe both not just NPCs, but also monsters that are living, breathing, engaging things versus just another miniature that you put out and they're like, oh, okay, we're fighting a chimera, who cares type thing. Make the chimera agoraphobic, Make the chimera particularly incensed by the color green. Make the chimera lonely. And see where it goes. And you still might end up fighting, but it will add a layer of like depth and nuance and richness that I think a lot of times people overlook.
And there's no greater place to do that, no greater platform than between a cleric and their deity, that all of a sudden they're learning new things about the deity that they didn't start this path knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think the one of the greatest opportunities that you have as a dungeon master having a cleric at your table is you get to learn new things about that deity.
Mm-hmm.
Your prime example of having Tiamat and then Tiamat developing into this thing that kind of falls completely outside. And then to speak even more to what you had just brought up was the external factors are what is important to the individual. What has happened to them and around them or what shaped them. That's the whole point of everything. Like, also words mean things. Like, so the way things are written are super important. But what happens to your characters develops them. What's happening to that deity develops them as well. So then you're having this back and forth interaction, and all of that, first off, like I said, is so much fun, because I can still imagine just being there, like, with that mind flayer wrapped around and just being, oh, this sucks. We can talk about it, or we cannot. I couldn't care less. I just thought I'd pop in, see how you're doing, and then just going through that. So like, having that there is just so much fun.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, if you're old enough to have experienced getting to know your parents as people, that's one of those things. You know, the first time that you can see past mom and dad, to like, oh, you're a dude, you know, and like, I love you, but like, you know, maybe we like the same things, or maybe we don't like the same things. Like, I can relate to you as a person. I can see a cleric's trajectory being similar, in the sense that you're this iconic force that, you know, I tremble in the face of. To maybe you never get past that point, especially as you increase in power, but you start to have a relationship and know them, that should play out at the table.
I have a question that I want to ask you guys based off of this whole conversation. I wanted to ask this question to begin with, but I feel like this whole conversation of a deity being different than we as even the DMs like think about them and read about them, right? Like going into a game with that, I feel like that brings a whole nother level into this question. So this question I want to ask is something that I think has been a question since the beginning of role-playing games, and I think that honestly it has caused probably more difficulty between DMs and players than anything else. If we were to look at, like, if there was a chart talking about stats, that's probably what I would imagine it would come down to. And that's, you got a cleric, and you have a cleric who who gets their powers from a deity. That leaves the question of, can they ever lose their powers, or can their powers go away for a certain amount of time? So I guess the question that I want to ask is, if you're placed in the seat of a DM, like, would you ever do that? And if so, when and why and how would you do that? How do you go about doing that if the answer is yes?
I mean, absolutely yes. I think the gods got things it wants. If you are very much acting contrary to those things, I think that can definitely be an issue. Again, I believe it was Pathfinder that, you know, the idea of being an ex-cleric or an ex-paladin and having to go through this path of atonement was very much a part of the game. Not so much in 5e, and I wouldn't come about it lightly. I think I would make sure the player knew that they were doing something in direct defiance with the deity's wishes, similar to how Neal was saying he had to sacrifice his power for something. But yeah, 100% it could be done, because that's the, you know, the word is the gods giveth and they taketh away, you know? So 100%.
How would you go about, like, giving indication that that was going to happen? Would it be a DM to player conversation, or would you role play through it somehow?
No, I'd role play through it. I'd role play through it.
Give them a sign.
Yeah, and because it goes back to also establishing how you want power to be administered. Because if you go back to the place where first and second level spells are you and third level spells are this, so then did you just drop off the last couple ones? Because that's totally possible. The other is that if it's a long-term thing, because this also happened, so in that same game, we also went back in time. So I also had warlock levels. So I couldn't do that anymore because my patron didn't exist. But so then you could still have that power, but now you don't have access to any more, because that deity could have given you, in essence, let's say 5th level spells, but you have no avenue not that same avenue by which to obtain 6th level spells. So there's a lot of ways that you can, it kind of all depends on how you're giving it to them as to how you could then also take it away. And again, it's just rife with possibility.
I would just say I definitely would make it. I would make it a plot point that paid off, though. I wouldn't make it just a hand slap, like you did a
not just
thing
a
that I didn't
punishment.
like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely would become, part of an arc or a trajectory.
Yeah.
That then that character would have to adjust accordingly. Because
Yeah.
again, I think that is compelling. A character that had all these ranks in cleric that suddenly is a fighter.
Mhm.
That you're
Or-
like. Mhm.
Or if you have a player who they completely go the opposite way, like, I mean, as the DM, you have the power to then introduce another god that maybe they take up worship of. I feel like the reason it's got like people cringe when they hear about that is because perhaps players and DMs have not been on the same page in their experiences in the past, and it hasn't been for some players an experience where the DM was trying to, like you said, weave a better narrative and bring that character and that player to a point where they're satisfied in that story even more so. And it has just, for some people, been, like you said, a hand slap. And that's not, I mean, we're not sitting as dungeon masters to punish our players because they didn't role play the way we wanted them to role play. That's just ridiculous.
I mean, you shouldn't, but some people get hung up in power tripping, and like,
Yep.
this isn't always true. But I have found the canary in the coal mine is when someone is like, "I'm a consequences DM." It's like,
that, or oh yeah, I love dungeon mastering. I just don't have a group right now because and I go, well, did you move or did they all leave the table?
yeah, it's not always that, but
certainly don't.
It's a flag though. It's like, boom. I'm like, okay, hold on, let me take a closer look at this guy. No, I agree.
Yeah, and that hand slap gives that, because I envisioned that hand slap and just doing it, and my thought would be you're trying to rest, you're trying to obtain those spells back, and you feel like that's not happening, but you're already in that headspace as that cleric, and then trying to have that communion with whatever deity and then having that conversation, because then that also you get to have that like in-game conversation of the expectations of both sides, the expectations of that deity and that expectations of that cleric, and then going back to the idea of that parent as a person relationship, and then you're developing so much more on both sides, and that hand slap, as it were, all happened in a rest period, and then you move forward.
And I mean, again, at the end of the day, it should advance the narrative. It's a collaborative art. So you should be getting something out of it. The story should be going forward. You should be better off for it and more excited because of it.
Oh, man. Especially at a level up,
Mm-hmm.
and then having that conversation and being like, okay, I understand as the deity where you're coming from. I'm going to reinvest in you as someone who is following me, and then have that be part of the level up process. I love that.
100% agree.
Oh, here's the 9th level spell. Game's broken. Have fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nope. It's like make sure you call down the meteor swarm on the right people. Good luck. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so good.
For the record, there is no wrong people to call a meteor swarm down on. Let me just put that out there. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good.
Too many players out there would definitely agree with you.
I said what I said, Internet. I said what I said.
That's
So
good.
many dead town guards.
Oh gosh. Arrows to the knee, meteor swarms to the head.
Oh man, meteor swarm would lay out a lot of mortals, man. A lot of level zeros get lit up by a meteor swarm.
So maybe to wrap this section up, is there a time that you remember, whether you were a player or a dungeon master, where let's maybe focus on like the NPCs, that there was an important either NPC and why were they important to a campaign, or even just a moment or a section of a story where clerics became important, and why was that?
I think in particularly in low magic campaigns, or not low magic campaigns, but lower level campaigns, where the ability to raise dead exists, but none of you have it. looking for a cleric. I know for me, when we first went to Wildmount on Beyond Heroes, and we got there right after the big battle at the temple that had happened on Critical Role, and Freely saw all these dead priests. He wanted to help just because, like, it didn't matter whether or not they believe what he believed, they believe something, you know. And so he's like, this is especially bad. This was like, he reacted more like this was like destroying fine art. But was kind of his place there. So I think if they need them initially in a transactional sense, like please resurrect my friend, but that converts into something else, some sort of debt is owed that they have to like do something for the temple that then becomes an adventure hook, that kind of thing. I like to do, you know, not necessarily so much just having them show up and preach, but having them show up to do something. Also letting them get worked by a cleric is good too. when they underestimate it, you know.
Yeah.
And you like
that in a game that we played, the only available temple with the level of spells that we're talking about wasn't necessarily a good one, and then that player was kind of permanently tied to that deity because they kind of had to give up something to get that back. And so then there were random side quests that they did without the rest of the group, and things were happening, and the rest of the group was like, what is happening? And then that continued story arc both for that player and the group as a whole.
Well, I won't spoil this for people that haven't read Dungeons and Dragons: A Darkened Wish all the way to the end, although you should. It's available now. That's sort of what happens to Helene. You know, a god offers her power for revenge, and then things happen. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
You can check it out on comicsology.com.
It's available on comicsology.com. Dungeons and Dragons: A Darkened Wish.
I mean, and you guys have mentioned now a couple times something that we hardly even touched upon is the fact that, especially if you have a cleric PC, then the temple or the church, the organization, the group of believers that they affiliate with, like, therein lies a whole bunch of NPCs that, or one very important one that they answer to, that is now something that you as a DM can introduce. But even in the sense of, you're starting a journey and your characters, well, yeah, none of them are clerics, but do they worship a god? Well, they might want to go and ask a cleric, a priest, for a blessing for this journey, for this adventure they are going on, for a prayer before they go into battle. There's when you're in a fantasy world where, like was said at the very beginning, there are clear and present signs that the gods are there, like the raising of dead. It would make a lot of sense for characters who worship gods to themselves to go and want to have some sort of prayer or blessing or hymn sang before they go off and do something important.
Yep. All still valid ways. And just as an aside, I mean, remember there's wizard colleges and bard colleges too. You know, there's all sorts of other structures and power schemes to plug people into, as long as it's interesting.
Yes.
You know, because it used to be back in the day, it was just the thieves guilds. You know, I'm dating myself in the editions that I've played. Spoiler alert, literally all of them. And those things are all interesting, that these people aren't just kind of quirks tossed on a wave of chaos, you know. Sometimes they're a string of nets tossed on a sea of chaos.
Yeah. Awesome. So we'll jump into one of my favorite parts of the episode, where we call it homework. It's the best thing. It's the best kind of homework, where it's just examples of things that you could read, that you could watch, that you could interact with to kind of get some more ideas about how to do all the stuff we're talking about. I don't know if you've heard recently, but A Darkened Wish is currently available on comicsology.com, and you should read it.
You should read it, yes. Yeah. Buy the individual issues and the trade paperback, yes.
Yeah, maybe you like it on Amazon and you do want to trade paperback, it's there as well, because technically Amazon owns Comicsology. Welcome.
Your friendly local game shop, if you can get to it, buy it there too. They need your help. Yeah.
Yeah, curbside pickup. Come on, get it together. That derailed me more than a little. So does
My
does
plan
anyone else
worked.
have? Does anyone else have? It's really the distracting nature of the ascot that you're wearing. I know you put it on,
And
nobody can see it.
you
but
know, I'm glad it worked. I got something out of this, man. Like this powdered wig is heavy.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I started sweating just the idea of a powdered wig. But does anyone else have other movies or anything that we're gonna toss out as examples that we can pull on clerics?
Honestly, Gandalf. Gandalf's way more cleric than a wizard. You look at what he actually does, the spells he actually casts. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then having that interaction, that level up, all of those, that entire arc. Yeah.
And when you dive into the mythology of Middle Earth, he literally was chosen by the gods to go out and help the people of Middle Earth. So,
Yep.
Yeah. And is there a more cleric thing than being like, hey everybody, get out of here. I'm gonna fight this demon. Also, it's because I don't want you
Flying
guys to get the
fools.
experience points so that I can level up and you don't.
Exactly.
But
I'm gonna 1v1 the Balrog. Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, we're throwing it back to older
and
editions
then
right
there's
there.
resurrection, right? So,
There it is. Yep. He went through time and space and all that, and then he has like a magic light that the Nazgul can't stand in front of. Yeah. Yeah.
my homework is not media or a book to check out, but it's an activity to do. If you have a player that chooses to be a cleric, or you are choosing to be a cleric yourself in a campaign, one thing that we didn't talk about was songs of praise and worship that can go to a deity that I think clerics would absolutely know and have be part of their activities of singing hymns and songs of praise. So go and look up like some old hymns and get inspired by them, change the words around, make them to whatever deity it is that your player is going to have their character follow, and create a hymn for either that all his orders sing or her orders sing, or it can be if you're that player themselves that you can go and make your own hymns. That'd be sweet.
Far over the misty mountains cold.
You have certainly made your Lord of the Rings fandom part of this.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, hey,
I would say
without those books, none of this would be happening. So there you go.
That's true.
that is very true. I would say read more deities. Go outside whatever your normal is. If you want to go pick up the Odyssey of Theros just to see
Oh man,
how
the deity stuff in that is fantastic.
Yeah, someone else approaches it. Another really good thing is looking up deity. Usually on like let's say you play in Forgotten Realms, that's kind of a go-to. Looking up what they were like through the different editions and getting a vibe on just like how deities develop over time, even inside of a pre-written campaign kind of thing.
I also would say too, when you're aware of when you're thinking about these deities and mythology, Greek mythology, a lot of times they were very precocious and very human. Yeah, just ask yourself what does an infinite force of nature really want with something? Like a lot of the stories I tell end up involving vampires. Weird, I know. And a lot of times when I have the oldest ones, I usually don't portray them as cruel. I portray them as indifferent. It's not that they just don't care. It's like your life is a flash into them. It's like when you've been alive 800 years, like you don't care what a 20-year-old has to say about anything. And it doesn't mean that you're going to go out of your way to hurt them, but it also doesn't mean you're not going to go out of your way to help them either. It's just they're literal leaves on the wind, you know? So why are the deities the way they are? And it is more than just I'm evil, yeah, because it's like, well, I mean, again, to me, the continuum to good to evil, both in the game and also in life, is a continuum from selflessness to selfishness. Whether or not you care more about the good of others or the good of yourself, and then behave accordingly. So and the gods should be the same way.
That's that analogy about the leaf of the wind because you can, that's how, I mean, if you think about it, and me looking at a bunch of leaves on the wind, like for the most part, I'll never care, but there might be that one leaf for reasons I don't even maybe understand that just draws my attention. And then I focus on it for more than any other leaf. So where can people go to find more from B. Dave Walters online? It sounds like quite literally anywhere might get us some.
Yo, like there's a non-zero chance. Honestly, you can Google like anything, and I'm probably like around. No, Twitter is the best place at B. Dave Walters. By the time you hear this, they'll probably be done crowdfunding for the documentary, but other news will be coming out about that. Let's just see. Let's just in the time of the pandemic, just off the top of my head, in no particular order, we crowdfunded and raised Electropunk, the graphic novel that I wrote and co-created. So that's coming out by now. Hopefully, we'll have the back end set up where you could still pledge for that if you like. It's a graphic novel coming. Have done season 2 of Dungeons and Dragons: The Dark and Wish. Did season 2 of Long Beach by Night. Did Battle Lords was before the pandemic hit. I'm doing Outbreak Undead right now. Doing Silver and Steel right now. Doing a metric ton of Patreon. Doing Ascension, Dungeons and Dragons: The Dark and Wish, Rage Across New York, and Aegon Adventures on Sunday on Bard and the Barbarian. So just follow me on Twitter. Even I don't know what I'm gonna be doing a month from now, and nobody's more surprised by all of this than me. Trust me. Like yesterday I did ADR for the first time on a TV show that I shot last year. So, man, champagne problems. That's what I have to say,
Yep.
dear listeners. Champagne problems.
Done. Well, thank you for coming on,
you so
spending
much.
some time with us. Yes, and calling all clerics.
Calling all clerics. So
we
yeah,
hope-
again, I'm calling my all paladin game this Saturday, which you should go watch the VOD for, because I promise you it was incredible. The God Squad. So yeah, that's I'm glad that I didn't walk in here, because that would have been awkward. That would have been like I wore the same powdered tux as one of you had. Yeah.
Well, we hope that you can come back on the show sometime in the future and grace us with your presence. And it sounds like maybe we should just do another episode then on paladins for the future episode.
Can we call it Palin Around? Because if so, I'll commit to it right now.
Absolutely, we'll call it Palin Around.
Yeah.
Done.
Boom.
Groovy.
It's in writing.
There it is. It's done. It's on the internet. It's been said 3 times. It's canon.
We want to thank B. Dave Walters once again for joining us on this episode of the Dungeon Masters Block. If you have worked together with your players who are clerics, or created a fantastic NPC that is a cleric and use them in a special way, and you want to write into us and tell us about it, we would love that. You can write to us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. If you like this episode or any other episode of the Dungeon Masters Block, also feel free to head over to the podcast app of your choice and leave us a review. We appreciate that, and it always goes a long way to helping us reach other people. You can follow us on Twitter at DMS_block, that's at DMsBlock, or you can head over and like our Facebook page. Both of those places are great places to go if you want updates about the show. We have a Patreon member shout out of the week, and this week's Patreon member shout out goes to Doc Von Braun. Doc Von Braun is, first of all, a fantastic name. Second of all, a silver dragon. So thank you so much, Doc, for supporting us, for supporting this show, for supporting all of the Block Party Podcast Network. We super appreciate it. As always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network. Check out other shows like We're So Bad at Adventuring, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, Detentions and Dragons, and more. But that's all that we have for you on this episode of the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God, killing characters, and lowering the egos of all the people at the table. I'm your host, DM Mitch, reminding you to always keep on dungeon mastering.
Goodbye.